Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar Migrating Your Apps from Parse to AWS. My name is John Burry and I'm an AWS Principal Solutions Architect. I'm joined with Andrew Chudd as well, a software development engineer. And we also have a special guest, Eric Nakagawa from Facebook, who is going to walk through some initial slides before we dive into the AWS slides and talk to us a little bit about Parse and the transition. Eric, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to you to begin with, and then I'll be back in a moment.
Thanks, John. Hi, everybody. My name, again, is Eric Nakagawa. I am a developer advocate at Parse, and I'm here to talk to you, to share with you folks some of the suggestions and help to guide you folks in the right direction for getting your app off and migrated off of the Parse system. So to start off, yes, Parse is shutting down. The official date that we plan on ending the service is January 2017, as I'm sure many of you are already aware. The suggested migration timeline that we have for apps built on Parse is for database. We believe that if your app is important to you and you're in this call, you should try to get your data off by 4/28. So by April 28, that's roughly 3 months after the announcement, your database should be migrated. Stuff like your app logic, if you plan on keeping and using the Parse server, as well as push and files, can be delayed up till around July. And the reason for this is we think the database is the most important part of your application, and getting it off the system as soon as possible is in your best interest. When you folks move your database off, either to one of our partners, such as the hosted service like MongoLab or one of the other services like even AWS running an instance. Keep in mind that the size of your database is going to vary quite a bit from what is displayed in the Parse dashboard. On the Parse dashboard, we show the amount of data that you're currently using. However, we're using RocksDB to store the data this way. And so when it switches over to something like mmap, which is often the original or default storage engine for Mongo, you can see somewhere between 3 to 5x the number that is displayed in your dashboard. So if your dashboard says 3 gigabytes, expect anywhere from 9 to 15 in terms of required storage for that database outside of Parse. This is going to be really important when you migrate off, because if you run out of space, the migration is going to fail and you have to either increase the instance size so that it has more storage or EBS volume or whatnot. Or talk with your provider to increase that size. One question people give me or always ask me is, how long does it take to migrate? Migration is very fast if you're based in the AWS US East availability zone. If your database is in this zone, the migration time can take anywhere from less than an hour for small applications to multiple days if you have hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes of storage. I doubt many of you do have that, but if you do, please contact me or ask a question, and we can exchange contact info for me to better help you. So if you're beyond 100 or 200 gigabytes, contact me and I'll help you get a fast track through. Moving on. So when you do migrate your data, you finalize that step. So once you set up your instance, once you pass over the strings required for us to access that database, and we copy all that information over, you can confirm when that data is ready to be switched over. Be careful, because once you do switch this over, there's no turning back. There's no going back to Parse. So you want to make sure that you've tested your data, make sure that you have enough storage, make sure that everything's looking right before you confirm. And if you don't confirm within 24 hours, you're going to have to redo the migration. So if it took you 2 hours to migrate and you wait 4 hours after that, you have to rerun it. So there's a little bit of we're trying to keep it safe for you folks. You don't end up accidentally migrating out and then never being able to come back to Parse. So be careful when you do it, but it doesn't take a lot of time. You can't see this, but that little rectangle should be a star. The Parse server, we open sourced the Parse server the same day that we announced the shutdown of Parse. And it's been a project that our team at Parse has been working really hard on. We have over 6,700 stars on our repo. And any of you attending this webinar should go check it out, because it's a great way to help you migrate your application off with minimal to little changes in your code. It is extremely active. I think we're beyond 50% of commits or pull requests are coming from the community. So we're really happy about that. And we're also going to be releasing a whole bunch of other things. One thing I can share is that dashboard support is going to be coming so that you'll have a way to view your data. Expect that within the next 2 weeks, assuming nothing major comes up. So we've released a bunch of additional functionality as well. There's a very simple push mechanism for helping you folks still provide, again, a simple push layer. There's also some S3 integration. So for customers that have data stored on S3 or plan on storing additional data on S3, you can now do it in your own buckets. Someone from our community built something called local environments using a project called Parse Anywhere, which allows you to build locally before you push it out. This can save a lot of time versus deploying your code to like a test or development application. And again, dashboard is under active development. I am beta testing it later this afternoon. It's going to be released soon. There's also a bunch of other stuff we're working on, and we don't have a timeline for these things, but I'm working hard with our team to advertise what those things are so that you folks can make decisions moving forward. Also, if you're a push-only application, you would still benefit by migrating your database off. And the reason for this is your data still has limitations in terms of requests per second. And so if you want to parse through your Parse users faster, moving off Parse would allow you to do it at a higher request per second limit than if you stayed at the in the current system. Take a look at it, consider doing it. It's very quick and easy to do, and you can operate your application without many additional changes as well. Also, the S3 migration tool is under development. So if you have something like 10 or 20 gigabytes of data, migrating that out is actually not easy right now. One method you could do is you could modify the file and save it, or you could wait until we have a migration tool. That's under development and will be released soon. So finally, here's the things I covered quickly. You should move your data by April 28th. This is in the best interest of your application and making sure that it runs properly or fast. When you do move, consider increasing, estimating beyond 3 to 5x the amount displayed in the dashboard. And the reason for this is that we don't display the index size, and so you should try to be more cautious and over provision the storage just to be safe. You can always clear it back later. One idea that I've shared with people that are trying to migrate off is move your data off, trim it down, and then resize your instance down to be smaller to not have to pay so much. AWS US East is the best availability zone for best performance for migrating off and keeping your app working. If you're going to keep your database, if you're going to move your database off, you want to be close to our API servers. Our API servers are based in US East, AWS region. Take a look at Parse Server. It is an open source project, and I'm working really hard to make it even better of a community. So we released a code of conduct. We're trying to, help the community, guide the community in the right direction so that it can grow beyond just being a replacement. Finally, migrate your push users and migrate your files. All this stuff will be coming soon, and you can do it right now. So this is the address to the Parse Server project. Take a look at it, star it, so you can follow any of the updates. And I believe we're going to have Q&A at the end, so I'll stick around for that. Thank you, John and AWS, for having this, and I'll be answering questions on the side.
Thank you very much, Eric. I really appreciate all that detail, and a lot of what Eric talked about will actually continue on a bit of those topics. For example, the Parse server, talking about the regions and so forth in this conversation. So let's go through the migrate your apps from Parse to AWS content on our slides here. And again, Andrew is joining me. He'll be assisting and answering questions here and there, and be available to be part of the QA after this as well. So to begin with, our agenda is, we'll first start off going through key AWS concepts. We'll be talking about some of the core components of AWS to make sure that we level set an understanding as we move forward about the specifics of migration. We're not going to cover all of AWS. There's a lot of concepts here, a lot of services as well. We'll be talking about the handful that are important for this conversation. We're going to go through the AWS Mobile Hub and talk about the AWS Mobile Services. Then migrating Parse Core to AWS. Talk about specifically the open source server that Eric just mentioned. Then we'll talk about moving from Parse Push to Amazon SNS Mobile Push and the differences between the two, as well as Parse Analytics to AWS Mobile Analytics and those differences as well. So let's dive in. So the key to AWS concepts we want to make sure we're on the same page with is AWS is a global infrastructure. When you sign up for an AWS account, when you provision services, the first thing you determine is what region you're going to establish those services in. And it's an important distinction because, as Eric talked about, the Parse configuration right now is in US East. There's also, again, various regions all around the world that you can set up your instances. And each region has availability zones, which I'm going to talk about in a second, what that concept is. And then 54 edge locations, which are top locations, which is in essence basically our CDN servers that are all around the world. And you can see on this graphic here where the regions are located and where the edge locations are. And the detail behind this, you can find specific detail online. I mentioned I'd come to talk about availability zones, and so the concept that AWS has is for each region we have multiple availability zones, which are distinct locations where server resources are hosted. And the key concept here is that we create differences between floodplains, between electrical connections, between internet connections. The goal is to create a durability between a region so that we can replicate data between availability zones and have a significant amount of durability because of this architecture. I won't go much further into this, but just the key concept is you pick a region and availability zones are part of the concept. As you can see on this graphic here again, one or more per region. Some regions have quite a few. So let's jump into the mobile hub and the AWS Mobile Services. The AWS Mobile Hub is a relatively new feature we've released with inside the console that allows you to configure and provision a number of AWS mobile services through one easy-to-use UI. As a matter of fact, what's nice about the Mobile Hub is all the services that you see here can be set up within minutes, whereas previously with the Mobile Hub, if I wanted to build out an application, whether it be a mobile application or a non-mobile application, which you can build both, I would need to go into each of these services one by one, spend some time configuring them and make sure everything is set up correctly, including all the security details of each service. The Mobile Hub will do that for us to a large degree, and then we just can go in and change the configuration to optimize it for each application we build. I'm going to show that in a second here, and we'll talk about that. But let's get into the details of what exactly Mobile Hub is doing. What you're looking at right now is what the UI looks like when you've started to create a project in Mobile Hub. You have, at the moment, 6 key groups of features that you can turn off or on, or actually have Mobile Hub turn on for you, and provision as well. You notice the boxes representing each of these features and the plus at the bottom. The key concept is by clicking on these, I'll be able to easily have a user sign-in capabilities or push notification capabilities, content delivery from the cloud to my app, or user data storage from my app up to the cloud, as well as analytics for my app in Cloud Logic. I'm going to go through slides on each one of these really quickly, and then I'm going to walk through the Mobile Hub, and then we'll get into the Parse specifics here. So the user sign-in allows for very simple configuration with sign-in providers such as Facebook and Google. We have Twitter coming soon. You can also have a sign-in, connection to your own system, and we walk through how that's done. We build a sign-in screen into a quick start app that you can download after all of this is built by the Mobile Hub, and I'll show that in a second. And I'll go through this relatively quickly because, again, just wanted to make sure that the understanding here is the parts we're going to be talking about are understood. User data storage allows for files to be stored up in the cloud and synced from the device up to the cloud. So these could be files, photos, or key value pairs of profile data, for example. Again, in the Quick Start app that Mobile Hub will build for you, we provide examples of this, including file, upload, download, and key value pair data. Mobile Hub will also build out Cloud Logic backend, showing you how AWS Lambda can be wired up to a mobile app quite easily. This basically allows you to run event-driven code where you do not have to manage a server, but the code runs in response to events in your application or events elsewhere on the internet. So the value of this is you can write the code but not have to pay for any resource until that code executes, and only at the time it executes at the millisecond level billing. The beauty of this is you have an incredible amount of scale and infrastructure available to you without having to manage it and without having to manage the security of that infrastructure. And the billing is extremely low. So I'd check out Lambda, but the beauty of this is Mobile Hub will wire up Lambda functions for you. It gives you a sample function and shows that. It also will do push notifications, and we'll dive deeper into this when we talk about migrating from Parse push to Amazon SNS mobile push. And it'll set up an SNS topic for you. It'll show you in the sample app how that works with demonstration features. And then app content delivery, bringing assets from the cloud down to your app, optionally through a CDN if you want to use one or not. And you can go ahead and select that option. App Analytics is also available to you with inside Mobile Hub. And we'll go deeper into that, and you get, with the analytics, a dashboard that shows you key details behind this. And then the Mobile Hub is going to give you a build option to download a specifically customized version of an app based on the features that you chose. And that will be available to bring up in your IDE of choice, whether you're developing for an iOS device or an Android device. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show this real quickly here. And thank you very much. All right. I have the Amazon Web Services console open, and you can see various services that we have available. And as I mentioned, we're just going to go through a few of these. But up here on the right-hand side, I have the Mobile Hub, which is one of the most colorful icons we have. I think it's the only one that's not just one color. And when I select it, I'm going to go into this UI that shows me all the different projects I'm working on. Each of these boxes represents various projects that I've been showcasing, sometimes at loft sessions and so forth, and various presentations. So by clicking on the plus over here, I can create a new mobile project, and I can give this a name that I want. And so I'll go ahead and say Parse Migration Webinar. And this, again, represents an app. It could be a mobile app. It can be another app. At the moment, with iOS and Android build features, it's focused on mobile applications. So I've got my screen zoomed in quite a bit on my browser. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and you can see that the screen resizes appropriately. But these are the boxes that we saw on the slide, the 6 different features. An example of how this works very quickly is if I want analytics in my app, I can click on this box here. I'm now in the App Analytics feature, and I can click Add Analytics and Save Changes. And what has happened now is if I go back to Configure More Features, I can see the UI visually shows me that I've turned this on for my app. When my app is built for me, then Analytics is going to be part of the code. I won't go through all of these real quickly because I want to get back into the Parse details specifically, but I'm going to go and showcase an example real quickly of, for example, push notifications, which I'll come back to. Enabling push for Android, and I would upload the details, allowing me to connect with Google Cloud Messaging with my API key and sender ID and save the changes. And when I've done this, I've enabled push. And on the left side of the screen here, I'm going to go into build. And quite simply, I choose my platform. And the features I chose, I only chose analytics and push at the moment. I didn't choose the others. Those features are built into a file that I can download and install on my computer. So the nice thing about this is the code is customized by the features I just chose. So when I install the SDK for Mobile Services SDK that we provide and make available to you, that contains all the code for all the options and features I may want. The beauty of the Mobile Hub is it brings the SDK resources that are necessary to connect to AWS, but only brings forward the code for the features I've chosen. And that is open up, and again, able to be opened up in my IDE. So I'm going to go back into the slides now and stop sharing my screen. Okay, great. So one other key concept is once you've built the application, or at least as you're developing it and you have an application that can be installed on devices, AWS provides a device farm, which is in our data centers, we have hundreds of physical devices, a whole fleet of iOS and Android devices that we will provision and install your app to, and we will record your app running on those devices with screenshots and the logs and so forth. Make that data available to you so you can test out your application remotely on devices that you choose. The nice thing about this is you can run test scripts written in Appium, Calabash, JUnit, and automate the tests as well. And it's a very useful feature and very important for being able to test on hardware that you don't own and automating those tests. A couple more concepts real quickly. AWS Mobile SDKs are available on Swift, Xamarin, Unity JavaScript, and you can see Objective-C and Android Java. So beyond just what the Mobile Hub provides with the iOS and Android builds, you can also install these SDKs yourself to use the mobile services. And the beauty of this is that the AWS services, there are over 50 AWS services that are available to you that your mobile application can connect to. You can see the category of services here. All these services have REST API calls, and again, your mobile application can connect to these to do a significant amount of the workload up in the cloud with AWS services, and the heavy lifting of these services is done for you. But let's get into specifics again for the Parse migration, now that we've talked a bit about how the mobile hub works and the mobile services. So what we're going to talk about now is migrating Parse core to AWS using a service called Elastic Beanstalk. So what Elastic Beanstalk allows us to do is deploy and provision a stack of resources automatically. And in this particular case, we actually have a link to a blog post that contains a lot of detail about how migrating from Parse to AWS can be done. There's various ways to do this, and this is one way I'm going to show you using the Parse core server, the open source server that Eric mentioned before, and installing it with Elastic Beanstalk. So I'll walk through these steps pretty quickly, but the first is deploying to AWS through a simple button. So actually I am going to share my screen again, and what I'm going to do is walk through this very quickly, how simple this is to do and get set up. So I am back in the console now and still on the mobile hub, but what I'm going to do instead is a couple things. One is I have the blog post open up here, Resources for Migrating Parse Applications to AWS. This was written by Jeff Barr. And in this blog post, I'm going to actually come down here to the third bullet point, how to set up Parse server on AWS using AWS Elastic Beanstalk. Now, this couldn't be simpler. It's very impressive how easy it is to get this going and how quickly. Once you have set up your AWS account, you come to this page on the blog post and click Deploy to AWS. This is going to launch the console and automatically set up a Parse server for you. You can give it a name if you want. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and name it Parse Server Webinar. An optional description. But at this point, all I need to do now is click Review and Launch. So the application is being created. After I've reviewed the information here, I can see that I've got the application name. It's a web server tier. I can see which container by default has been set up. It's going to be a 64-bit Amazon Linux installation running Node.js. I can see load balancing and auto-scaling has been set up for me, or will be when this is done. And the Parse server itself, the link to it and the zip file associated with that is referenced. So I'm going to come down here and choose Launch. And so what's ends up happening now is Elastic Beanstalk is going through the steps to provision the resources for me to get Parse server running with inside AWS. And this will take a few minutes to work. Sometimes it's, depending upon when you set up Elastic Beanstalk, it can take a few seconds, but we can come back here in a second. But the key concept is that this, again, is being set up. As a matter of fact, I have a Parse server already set up over here. When that installation that I just started is done, you'll see this. I have an overview showing the health of the server. I can see again which version that I'm downloading from what file was used to install the resources on the software resources on this server, and I can see my details of the events that have happened. So this server is now available for me to connect to, and a key things I want to talk about is a few more steps I need to do to provision this server correctly. So the first thing is we need a Mongo database to set up. By default, the server does not have a MongoDB database. So we've actually, in this blog post and setting up the server, walk you through step by step what I just showed you. But then we show you how to set up a Mongo instance as well. And in this post, we're showcasing a service called Mongo Lab, which basically allows you to very easily deploy to AWS a MongoDB instance. So I have Mongo Lab open up here, which has actually rebranded itself, interestingly enough, since we did that post. Now it's called imlab. Nice 4-letter URL too, which is really great. So imlab.com is where you would go and set up an account, and there's a free tier, which gives you 500 megabytes of space, I believe, for free. And once you've set up your account, you would click the Create New option, and I'm going to walk through that real quickly. And so basically what I'm doing is I can choose various cloud providers, and since AWS is here, I'm going to choose that. And down here I can see again the particular options I have for setting up this database. And in this case, by default, replica set cluster is chosen, but I'm going to choose single node so that I can take advantage of the sandbox with, again, half a gig free. I give it a database name, and I can call it, again, anything I want. So I'm going to be very creative and call it Parse Webinar. Click the create, and it must be all lowercase, so let's correct for that. Create new Mongo database, and just like what we saw with Elastic Beanstalk in AWS, now a Mongo database deployment has happened for me. So I can see and hear the details behind this and so forth. So back to the step-by-step, which you can follow yourself. I believe the link has been put into the webinar for this page. The next steps would be to configure the setup for Mongo database, MongoDB. In doing so, you need to make sure that your app ID and master key are added into the configuration for Elastic Beanstalk, and then you can validate that that's worked with these commands down below. Pretty simple instructions to walk through, and when you're done with this, you now have a Parse open source instance running on your own AWS set of resources that have a MongoDB set up as well. Okay, so I'm going to switch back and stop my screen share and go back to the slides. And the rest of these slides are walking through what I just talked about, setting up the Mongo database, configuring AWS and Mongo Lab, and I just showed the demonstration. So let's jump now into push and talk about migrating from Parse Push to Amazon SNS Mobile Push. This particular slide represents, again, a mobile app that was developed, and a very popular one, and the push service that they used was sending hundreds of millions of push notifications a day, and they were using 35 EC2 instances to manage the push service themselves. This was a pretty massive scale, and it required 6 load balancers to manage the traffic across all of this. And they themselves were constantly trying to scale out both at the process level and server level, and there were challenges with managing this system itself. So they moved over to using SNS, and the reason why I'm talking about this is just to talk about the simplicity of deployment to SNS. They were able to, without working with us, they just leveraged this service themselves online, and were able to move 0 to 500 million messages daily, almost overnight. And you can see as they cut over from their own service to the SNS service, the type of scale that they were able to get. So day 1, 10 million, and then up to 170 million, up to 500 million, and so forth. So the key point I'm trying to make again here, and repeating quite a bit, but it's critical, is that the SNS service is built for scale, as are the other AWS services, a massive amount of scale. And based upon the configuration that you do on your open source instance, you're able to achieve a significant amount of scale in the open source instance of the Parse server. And then when leveraging the mobile services such as push, as we're seeing here, those services will be able to take as much data as you throw at them, really without breaking a sweat. So the pricing of SNS Mobile Push, you can see that 1 million requests or 1 million push delivery and 1 million push delivery attempts and 1 gigabyte of data out is 50 cents per million requests. And this is 50 cents per million mobile push delivery attempts as well. And there's applicable data transfer charges as well that's part of that. But you can see it's very inexpensive. So let's talk about the specifics of migrating to SNS and the various steps. As a matter of fact, on that link that I sent to that blog post, there's also a bullet point that talks about migrating to SNS and the steps involved there. So the first thing you're going to need to do is inside the Parse console, you're going to want to export your Parse push data. And you can see on the top right, there is under the core browser, you can choose edit and export this data. And so what will happen is that's going to allow you to export a class of data to a zipped JSON file that we'll be using later. So this is an example of what the JSON file looks like. And it should look like this sample you see with device token, device type, and channels as well. So, excuse me. So once you've migrated, once you've done this, the next step you want to do is obtain your APNS and GCM credentials. This is for your Apple push service and the Google push service credentials. So these are the steps involved for doing so. Basically, once you have these, also for the Windows push notification service, if you're leveraging that, you want to get these credentials and save them because we'll be using them later when we go to the mobile hub and entering them. So the next step you would do is actually create an AWS account if you don't already have one and go into the mobile hub and go ahead and set up the push notification service in the mobile hub using the options that I showed you before. You would create a new project in mobile hub, then you would click on the push feature that you want, and that'll be available to you. What you're seeing on the screen right now, this is the mobile hub UI, and I showed you the configure pages and the build pages, but down at the bottom left of the mobile hub UI, you have a resources tab icon that you can choose, and that's what we're looking at here. In the bottom left box, you can see that Amazon SNS has been provisioned for you, and a topic has been created for you once you've gone through the steps of setting up SNS. We're going to go ahead and copy this topic as one of the next steps that you're going to need to do. And then you're going to have an SNS application created. So this is the SNS application name that looks like this, and that's been created. So this resource, basically, talk a little bit about this. That long address is an Amazon resource name. And this is a concept, basically, that everything inside AWS that can be identified has an ARN, an ARN. And that is what you're copying right now. So we're going to go ahead now and take the credentials that we need for our access key ID and our secret access key ID for our AWS. And when you have these credentials, we're going to combine all of these together, the information that we had in all the steps previously, the JSON file, the app name, for the APNS platform app name, the GCM platform app name, and Windows as well if you're using that. And then the SNS topic we copied before, our AWS key, and our secret access key. We're going to put all of these together and leverage a tool that has been built for this step. And this is the Parse push migration tool, which again you'll see from the blog post, and the link is here as well. The URL is here for it. And once you've got this tool, which is a Java file, run it in the command line with this format and the information that we had, then the migration will begin. Now, in the table that I'm showing right now, I want to call out key differences between Parse push and Amazon SNS mobile push. And you can see on the left-hand side, we have a list of features, and then we have the ones that are supported by Parse push and ones that are supported by Amazon SNS. And you can go through these each one by one, and I won't spend time going through every single one of these, but I do want to make some key call-outs for this. One is that things like advanced targeting, custom segments, scheduled notifications, those aren't key features of Amazon SNS. They're actually not features of Amazon SNS. I want to be crystal clear. As well as A/B testing, push localization, and so forth. This can be built with Amazon SNS, but it isn't a feature that is built in to Amazon SNS. So to be clear, using various other AWS resources, such as Lambda, you're able to put in logic that takes advantage of these features, but you would have to build that yourself. You do get that out of the box with Parse, and so this is a delta between the two services. Campaigns as well is different. And then towards the bottom, you can see that 100% delivery success or failure logging is something that you do get with Amazon SNS. And then you can see the pricing down below as well and the differences between these. These slides are going to be available as well, so you don't have to memorize it at the moment. You'll be able to look at these slides later and see this as reference. This is also data that's in the blog post and linked to from it. You'll be able to see this data as well there. Okay, so let's jump into the last part of our discussion here, which is migrating from Parse Analytics to AWS Mobile Analytics. So first off, Amazon Mobile Analytics allows for you to insert code in your application and even a website as well. And we provide that code to you, and that connects up to the AWS service and allows for the collection of telemetry from your application to be sent up into the cloud, stored, aggregated, and be available for export as well. But some of the key concepts I want to make sure are understood here is that one, the mobile analytics system is built for scale. Again, massive scale. The data itself, the system will never say no to your data. Reports are available within generally about an hour, sometimes available within minutes as well. But we generally say about an hour is when you're able to look at your data in the system. Again, scales to billions of events per day for millions of users, and we provision all the resources that are needed automatically for this. And number three is a key concept as well. You own your data. The data collected is not aggregated at all. It's not shared at all. It's not looked at by AWS for any intelligence. It is your data. You hold it. We will provide a dashboard of information off the data for your information only. And again, we don't leverage that. So the simple steps is, again, sign up for an AWS account. Then you download and integrate the mobile SDK or use the mobile hub to go ahead and turn on mobile analytics. And then once the code is in your application, you can then start seeing the activity come across. And you can view engagement and session activity reports in the console within minutes generally. And here's an example of those reports. Daily active users, monthly active users, new users, and so forth are things that you get out of the box. But you also have the ability to go beyond this. So you can see these 9 key business metrics that come down. And again, with one line of code, the key concept is basically you insert the code into your app at one location, and then from there on out, the SDK will be collecting the information and sending to the cloud. So more detail in this case, there's a tab in the console, and you can see the reports there. And detail about the fact that you can track retention for marketing campaigns and new features and so forth. And probably the most important aspect of this is the ability to track custom events. So the out-of-the-box metrics are very interesting and very valuable, but the most value you're going to get out of this is being able to insert into your app references to when a custom event should be recorded. And we showcase how that's done. We give you the code for that, and you're able to then record. You can see the examples on this slide. For example, track number of likes and shares per news article in the news app, or number of songs played in the playlist. Other examples would be with games. You can check the level of a game you're at when you move to games, or when any material activity occurs that you want to record for purposes of analysis, then you would put a custom event in. And I can't overstate the importance of this in recognizing the value of your app to your users. So seed custom events throughout your application. And you will most likely be using this particular type of code when you're using mobile analytics more than anything else. Here's an example of the difference between the Parse custom events and the AWS custom event. Logically, they're the same, but the format is different. A Parse custom event, if we start on the right-hand side, is a list of key value pairs in one dimension. In this case, one list of key value pairs, and then AWS JSON allows for, again, in the format, tracking attributes and various event types with a little bit more detail than you get in Parse. But again, the translation between the two should be quite simple. So the mobile analytics at this point, because of the cutover right now, I'm going to go ahead and switch computers to make sure I can demo this. So one moment. So I'm going to go ahead and share out my screen again and pop into the console. And so I'm currently in the mobile hub here, and if I click on the top left, I will jump into, again, a console. And I'm going to go directly into mobile analytics here. So here is the screen that we saw on the slide. At the moment, I actually don't have much activity here. As you can see, I can drop down and choose date ranges for these reports. And I can actually choose different apps as well that I want for these reports. So once you've set up mobile analytics in your code, again, you get this data starts flowing and these reports start coming online. But a couple things I want to showcase real quickly. Back to the mobile hub, setting up the analytics is, again, as simple as clicking on App Analytics and choosing Not Required or Required, and that's all you do. When you download the application, you build it and download it, the code for analytics is now inserted into your application for you and just works. You can then go in and add custom events throughout your application as you build it out. And so the custom events tab that I have here will showcase all the different custom events that I have as part of my application. And so we also provide the opportunity to export your data. And this is a very key concept here, because everything I've shown right to now, including the custom event data that is captured, is important, but you haven't yet connected the last section of wired up the last component, I should say, to really make this valuable to you. Because at the moment, Mobile Hub just provides the dashboards until you export the data. So you have two options, and this export is an ongoing export. It's not a one-time event. So from the moment you turn it on, then the analytics data that flows through Mobile Hub will then be available to you to use elsewhere. So you can choose Amazon S3, which is our object storage, where in essence basically files would be written out to that service that you can then read, or you can choose Amazon Redshift plus Amazon S3, and this allows the data to go out to S3 and sit in files and then be automatically imported into our petabyte scale data warehouse called Redshift. You're going to want to do this step with analytics, otherwise it's nice to see those dashboards, it's helpful for developers and testers, but it's not really what you're going to need for a production level analysis of your data. So I would encourage you, once you've set up mobile analytics, the very next thing you do is turn on this auto export feature. Okay, so let's go back in then to our slides, and I will stop sharing my screen. Okay, so this table now, similar to the one I showed, and I'm not quite certain how easily it can be read, but just like the previous table, this is available through that link to the blog post when you go into the mobile analytics bullet point. And this shows the differences between the Parse analytics and the Amazon mobile analytics, detailing, for example, the active users, features, sessions, custom events, and so forth. And you can see there's quite a bit of parity between the two. There's revenue that Amazon Mobile Analytics tracks that isn't part of Parse Analytics, and you can see the details behind that when you go through Mobile Analytics. So you could track in-app purchases and so forth inside AWS Mobile Analytics. And then the auto export feature that I mentioned down below. I want to, again, make sure that that is not forgotten in your setup. It is a common situation where analytics data Mobile analytics has been turned on, but the analytics data isn't really usable because that export feature wasn't turned on until a point in the future. And that is it for these slides. And we have about 10 minutes for Q&A. And I'm going to go ahead and take a look here and pull out some questions and answer them. So I will. Okay. Taking a look at the questions here and picking out some ones to answer in real time. So
should be some assigned to you.
Okay, so here's one. Does Amazon AWS intend on working with Parse server team to support RDS use with it? And what I can say on that is that first of all, I'm very impressed with the Parse server team, how much work they're actively doing, how Eric has talked about this. And so I can't talk specifics other than the fact that we are absolutely wishing to help out as much as we can and assist with that. Making sure that is as much support AWS can give to the Parse server team, we will give. And can production data be copied to a test Parse app before doing the final migration? Any how-to available? This is an example of a specific Parse question that we can actually get some help from the Parse team as well that can answer. So some of these questions, I wanted to call that out as an example. We will follow up with some answers afterwards as much as we can with specifics on the Parse server. So are there any scalability challenges currently known for Parse server? And Chris is asking this. So I want to call this out as a very specific, important point that separates how I talked about with the mobile services when I talked about the scale that's available with SNS. I talked about the scale that's available with CloudLogic and Lambda and scale that's available with mobile analytics. The Parse server itself architecturally is distinct from those services because those services are fully managed, meaning that they're not running on just one server, they're running on fleets of servers, and the resources necessary to use those services are automatically provisioned across those fleets for you. So scale is not a concept that you have to plan for in terms of how your architecture and how your code works. The Parse server, however, is installed on an instance, meaning basically a virtual machine in the AWS infrastructure. And you can choose the size of that machine. You can choose the resources behind it. So one of the key concepts I want to point out is that how you've configured the Parse server inside AWS defines its scale. And you don't want to over-provision, but you also want to be cognizant of whether or not you've under-provisioned by taking a look at the server logs and the activity of that server. So that is not a managed service. Can we migrate Parse cloud code to AWS CloudLogic? Well, a couple things on that is the answer is yes. The Parse cloud code can actually run in the Parse server because it is a Node.js installation, and from the conversations that I've been part of and heard that generally it works. There might be some edge cases where things aren't working perfectly. I want to be clear. I can't say it's 100% parity from what I've seen. That being said, you can also take the Parse cloud code and push it into AWS Lambda, which we also call CloudLogic. And it is also Node.js as one of the languages you can choose. And so in general, that should work. There might be some slight modifications, but it should not be a significant effort to port that.
This is Andrew. I have some questions that I'm going to go ahead and answer. The first one was a question about support for Swift in Mobile Hub. So first I'll say that our product roadmap, 90 to 95% of our product roadmap is driven directly by customer requests, and we have had a lot of requests for Swift. The AWS mobile SDKs already support Swift. You can use them within a mobile app, but currently the Mobile Hub sample app is Objective-C. But you can, if you're doing Swift app development, you can use Mobile Hub to set up your resources, but the sample code you'll have to go by will be currently Objective-C, but you can definitely use that code within a Swift app. Second question was about SNS and targeting specific devices. Amazon Simple Notification Service provides mobile push capabilities to devices. Each device, as it registers with the platform, gets a device token, which it registers with SNS. That creates what's called an endpoint in Amazon SNS. And you can use that endpoint, and that'll allow you to publish messages to the device, specifically to that device, either through the REST API for Amazon SNS, or you can use that from an SDK. So, for example, from an AWS Lambda function. And SNS also has the concept of topics, which allows you to publish messages to groups of devices who have opted in for a specific topic. So that was one of the questions people had. Another question people had was about sign-in. So within Mobile Hub, currently if you go to the sign-in feature, there's a custom option. And what that does is it creates an identifier for you in Amazon Cognito, which will let you bring in your own backend for what we call developer authenticated identities. So you can have your own sign-in system. The question specifically about migrating Parse users, I would like to give Eric that question. I'm not sure if he's got an appropriate answer for that, but those were the questions that I was going to cover.
Thank you, Andrew. And so this is John again. We've got about 3 more minutes left, and I'm just going to go through and kind of take a look at a few more questions here, and make sure I wrap up with some more concepts real quickly. So there's a question: what is the cost of deploying Parse Server and Beanstalk? And start off with Beanstalk itself is free to use, but the cost of deploying the Parse Server depends upon the instance type that you choose. In essence, basically, how many resources are you choosing for the server to have? Memory, what type of disks, and so forth, disk space. And if you take a look online, there is a breakdown of the cost for each server instance and how that's broken out. The answer is it depends on what you choose. So I apologize for being vague, but I do want to make that clear. There isn't one standard cost. It depends on the instance type. As you notice, when I used in the demo, there was an instance type that was chosen for me as a default for that demo. And again, going online with AWS and taking a look at pricing for EC2 instances, and EC2 is our Elastic Compute Cloud Service. That pricing is where you'll find that. So there's another question Andrew has.
Yeah, I'll take one. There's a question about querying and accessing data from a mobile app. So currently within Mobile Hub, under the user data storage feature, there is the ability to enable Amazon Cognito Sync, which is user-specific key-value pairs, which are synchronized across devices. So if a user signs in with a social network, for example, Facebook or Google, on multiple devices, and they save to Cognito Sync on one device, it will synchronize automatically to their other devices they're signed in on, so that a lot of customers use that to synchronize game state or settings across devices. Another option that's available in terms of querying and accessing data is Amazon DynamoDB, which you could access using the mobile SDK directly from a mobile app, or you could access it from an AWS Lambda function. So that's our fully managed NoSQL database. It's not currently demonstrated in Mobile Hub, but you can always enable any one of the other AWS services and access those from a Lambda function. And the AWS Mobile Hub does give a demonstration of how to invoke an AWS Lambda function from a mobile app. There's a nice little Hello World demo that creates a Lambda function for you. We'll get you started that way. And the other database solutions, Amazon RDS, Elasticache, Aurora, are all available to you. But typical design pattern for accessing a SQL database would be to do it from either an AWS Lambda function or from something else server side, instead of going directly from the mobile app.
Okay, so thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you very much as well, Eric, for joining us, and we're going to go ahead and sign off. The references, as I mentioned, are all online for you, and this webcast will be available to review online as well as the slides. Thank you very much for joining us and for the great questions, and have a good day.